We talking about practice. Not a game, not a game. We talking about practice.
Everyone to the After Practice podcast with myself, Lake Lewis. You can subscribe to this podcast on any of the major podcast carriers: Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We're fortunate enough to be on there, and we appreciate all your support. You can actually watch this podcast, a couple times during the week from sportsjourney.com. So if you're watching this right now, what's up? Big weekend if you live in the DMV area. If you're a Washington football fan, your Thanksgiving food on Thursday tasted oh so good because the Washington football team went into Dallas and basically bludgeoned the Dallas Cowboys. Beat Dallas down 41-16 to catapult, put themselves, in position. This is what you want. You want to be in position playing meaningful football in December. And right now, because of the results of the New York Giants Cincinnati Bengals game yesterday, the Washington football team and the New York Giants are tied atop the NFC East division with 4 wins apiece. As you know, New York beat Washington 2 times this year, so if these two teams were to end in a tie at the end of the year, the Giants would actually win the division and go on into the playoffs and host a home game because they beat Washington twice this season. Somehow, some way, I've always thought that those losses, especially the one in the Meadowlands, I always felt like that may come back and haunt Washington later in the year if indeed they needed a tiebreaker to get into the division. You can't discount the Philadelphia Eagles as well. They play tonight, Monday Night Football. It's going to be interesting to see if they can hold serve and put themselves back up. If they win tonight, then they will be a half game up over the New York Giants as well as Washington. So the NFC East heating up. Is Dallas out of it? Maybe so. I wouldn't say just yet that they are. I highly doubt that they can win the division. But these teams are so close right now. I think that the win on Thursday for Washington was great. It was on national TV. As I mentioned, Thanksgiving Day. This is a COVID era that we're in right now, so a lot of us aren't traveling to far away road games. So I know a lot of my counterparts were home as well, and it felt good to be home for Thanksgiving for once. I mean, it was really nice. This team has played on Thanksgiving for the last 4 years, so we've been gone, pretty much either on the road or at the stadium here locally. So it was nice to be home, eat some good food. Hopefully you didn't eat too much. I know some of you out there got the itis late on Thursday. There was no Steelers-Ravens game, so basically people were just home eating after Washington won that game. So we're going to break that down. We'll talk about the NFL as a whole. There's some results that happened yesterday that were mind-boggling, frankly. I think the Cincinnati-New York game was a surprise to me from the standpoint that I thought New York, look, if you're trying to win the division, you have to do what Washington did to Dallas on Thursday. You've got to steamroll bad football teams. And if you don't, you're going to miss out on opportunity. And the Giants almost had a disastrous loss against Cincinnati. Ultimately, they won the game. They made the plays that needed to be made. Big defensive, strip of the quarterback Allen yesterday. And that sealed the win for them. But to let Cincinnati hang around in that game when you can still tell that this was a team that's demoralized, from the loss of who I think will probably be the rookie of the year, if not co-rookie of the year, and Joe Burrow, their quarterback. When he went down last week, you saw them against Washington just basically, I don't want to say fold up shop, but their hearts weren't in it. And I think that they're still in a shock mode right now. Have they recovered from his injury? No, they haven't, and they won't. Probably not until he's back on the field somehow. But with all that being said, they competed. That's all you have to, ask for from professionals to compete. And they almost stole one from the Giants yesterday. That would have been a horrific loss. And I tweeted out, literally when I think the Giants, they scored and then they held the Giants on a nice defensive stance on their part. They get the ball back, and all they needed was maybe 20, 25 yards to try to kick a game-winning field goal. And I'm sitting there thinking, the stars are aligning for the Washington football team. Like, you can't write a better script than this. All these things are literally just aligning themselves for this team to win the division and perhaps make the playoffs. Well, guess what? That's wishful thinking. You know, it's a little premature, too early. They're going to have to earn it, just like every team in the NFC East. Whoever's going to win that division has to earn it. But Cincinnati had an opportunity, and right before I was getting ready to tweet, I mean, I'm telling you folks, I was getting ready to hit the send button. I literally was getting ready to hit send, and soon as I do that, Cincinnati has, a horrific play where they lose the ball. Brandon Allen is stripped, and the Giants recover the ball and win the game. So just like that, the Giants are at 4-7. Again, they have a tiebreaker, so they're technically in first place. But it looks good. During the game, they had a graphic come up about the playoff picture right now. And on the left-hand side of the screen, it was 4 teams, 4 division-leading teams. The Rams, was a division-leading team. The Buccaneers was a leading. The Saints was a division-leading team. Washington, and then you think of in the NFC North, you had Green Bay. So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, these teams have winning records and they're legit Super Bowl contenders. I don't think there's a juggernaut in the NFC this year. I think there's some really good teams. I still predict Seattle to come out of the NFC. I'm not backing off my, early prediction of Seattle and the Ravens. I got to say that one kind of on the hush, because right now, if the playoffs started, the Ravens would not be in the AFC playoffs, and they've got a tough tilt ahead of them going forward. But nevertheless, it was nice to see Washington on there, to see them just after everything that they've had to overcome this year, this whole year, 2020. I mean, you name the situation, and this organization has had to deal with it. Just ugly things, too, on top of that, that they've had to deal with. Some of it they brought on themselves, we know that. But some of it they're trying to dig their way out of, with a new group of people, good people, too, I may add. But just everything that they've had to overcome. And then in the season, to deal with the quarterback situations. You had your young prize first-round draft pick really wasn't up to par, so to speak. They had to sit him. That was a controversial move in itself. Ron Rivera seemed to have righted, the ship on that. Kyle Allen wasn't playing bad at all. He wasn't playing poorly at all. He was actually playing pretty well, enough to win a game or two. He was. And he goes down with injury. And then the biggest storyline outside of COVID, in my opinion, in the NFL this year, period, is the return of Alex Smith. For him to be starting football games, not just putting pads on, and I'll be the first to say it, I never say, well, everybody else said it, but in this regard, most people, as far as my colleagues, thought that it was a nice gesture on Washington's behalf to have Alex Smith make the roster. He can still make his money, recruit, the money that he still has left on his contract, guaranteed money. After everything he's been through, class act, quality human being, family guy, team player, you see him out there and you're thinking, okay, it's good that he's in his pads, but he will never take a snap under center for Washington. I think most people were thinking that. Probably you, the fans, were thinking that as well. This guy will never, ever take a snap from under center in a regular season game. Well, not only has the guy done that, he's started 4 games, and they've got a nice 2-game winning streak right now. I understand they beat Cincinnati. Obviously, Joe Burrow was knocked out in that game. Cincinnati has a losing record, but Cincinnati had been one of those teams that had played tough against some much mightier opponents than Washington coming into that game. So, they were actually the favorite to win that game, ironically. Washington gets the dub on them. And then, obviously, Thursday, they get another big one against their arch rival Dallas Cowboys. So that's 2 in a row. First time Ron Rivera's done that with this team. In fact, that's the first time that they've done that in, 2-3 years, as far as put together a string of victories. Last year, they won 3 games. They've also done something this year that they couldn't do all of last year. And if you look at their wins, 2 over the Dallas Cowboys, 1 over the Philadelphia Eagles, and 2 losses, obviously, to the New York Giants, 3-2 in the division. You really can't, scoff at that. 3-2 in the division. They've won more games in the division this year than they won as a whole all of last year. Last year, 3-13, 0-6. I'm sorry, 0-5 within the division. So you put those things together. 0-6 in the division. I apologize. 0-6 in the division. You put that stuff together, and you can see progress. You can see that this is a football team, young football team that has some talent sprinkled around. They're starting to come together. Is it going to be enough to overcome, their inadequacies? Is it going to be enough for them to propel themselves to win the division? Because that's the only way any team out of the NFC East makes the playoffs this year. You have to win the division. If you don't win the division, you don't make the playoffs. The irony is, if you do win the division, you get a home game. And that would just be a nice storyline, too, on top of everything. It's starting to look good. I don't know about you, but when I see that new W, that new logo up, the Washington football team, when I see that now, Washington football team, and I see that logo starting to look better to me each and every week. When you win, I've said this before, I said this all off season. I don't care what they name themselves. If they're winning, who cares? They could be called the Washington football team losers. But if they're winning, nobody's going to think they're losers. Nobody's going to care what the nickname is. But now, that Washington football team is kind of resonating with me. It rolls off the tongue a lot better than it did in the very beginning. A lot of us were like, damn, I have to write this when I do my articles. I have to pronounce this in every broadcast, Washington football team. Can I abbreviate it, WFT? Doesn't have the same ring as, HTTR, which most fans here in this market know. But now that Washington football team's starting to click a little bit. And I tell you what, if they go into Heinz Field on Sunday and beat the Steelers, it's really going to resonate. It's going to have this town going loosey-goosey. They're going to be a buzz because you need something good right now. You need something to feel good about with COVID. The numbers are going back up, and our thoughts and prayers with anyone that's affected by that, or your family or a family member. Our condolences and prayers are with you. But nevertheless, right now, when you get a W, and you get a W on national TV in front of, just the world to see, and then you're a guy like Antonio Gibson, rookie running back, has a statement game. The guy's been having statement games for the last several weeks, but to be able to do score 3 touchdowns on national TV, now people are like, hey man, who's this Gibson kid? I might have to get him on my fantasy team. People are starting to see other guys. To see Terry McLaurin, the guy that I consider to be the face of the Washington football team, for him to ball out as he always does, but to also make a tremendous hustle play, which I thought was the play of the game. I absolutely did. For him to track down and chase down Jalen Smith after Jalen Smith intercepted a pass, Alex Smith, I don't know what Alex was thinking on that throw, by the way, but for Jalen Smith to be heading down the sidelines, and folks, let me remind you, Jalen Smith is an athletic marvel at linebacker. We're not talking about a slow, doofy, guy that just wants to hit. No, this is a playmaker, a guy that does a lot of different things. He's come back, from a bad injury. He had knee injury at Notre Dame, and he's turned himself into one of the game's best, young middle linebackers. So for him to be walked down, on top of that, McLaurin was interfered with. Someone else tried to throw a block on him, and McLaurin still tracked him down. That play saved so much momentum. I can't even begin to tell you. If Jalen Smith takes that into the end zone and it's 17-17, I don't know if we're having the same conversation today. I'm not saying Washington would have won the game, because to me, and I said this all game, you go back to my Twitter. By the way, you can follow me on Twitter at Lake Lewis. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Lake Lewis Jr. So, I tweeted out that not only was that play the biggest play of the game, it just cemented what I saw. And what I saw for most of the game was Washington was the better football team. They clearly were. And it's not a fluke. This year, 2020, they're better than Dallas. They really are. You can align it up to injuries. You can say whatever you want. Both teams have had adversity they've had to deal with. The one thing that I thought, I was expecting to see more from the Cowboys at least, I was expecting to see better coaching. Mike McCarthy is a guy I do respect. He's got a Super Bowl under his name, Super Bowl W under his name, while he's with the Green Bay Packers. But there were some questionable calls in this football game. I mean, three jump out to mind, and I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. Early in the game, 4th and 1, kick the field goal, get the points, and then you don't do that, which was disrespectful to Washington's defense. You thought you could do whatever you wanted, and you didn't get it. There was another time you faked a punt, on your side of the field. What are you doing? And then there was a time you go for it on 4th and 1 on your side of the field. All three of those gaffes aided in Washington points that were needed to win the game. And for my money, if you're the Cowboys, you can't feel good about that. You can't feel good about a coach that was supposed to come in and bring you stability. Mike McCarthy was supposed to come in and, do something that Jason Garrett could never do, and that's, find ways to win games or not get out coached. Well, it's starting to look like Jason Garrett should have still been the coach of the Dallas Cowboys. That's just my opinion. Because when I look at the New York Giants, where Jason Garrett is now the offensive coordinator, I'm impressed. I mean, I'm really impressed. I'm impressed with the fact that Jason Garrett, doesn't have their best player on the field, and Saquon Barkley. I got to do it, folks. I'm sorry. It's tradition. You already know what we're getting ready to do. We are. Okay, had to do it. So for Saquon Barkley not to be, out on the field, I'm seeing Wayne Gallman yesterday against Cincinnati rush the ball, 25 times. They're starting to turn that offense into a more of a power offense, not having to put the onus on Daniel Jones to beat you. And now you're starting to see production across the board for the Giants. Evan Ingram had a nice game yesterday. Sterling Shepard, since he's come back, he's been playing well. So they're mixing it up, but they're running the football consistently. And that's what's going to, ultimately, either catapult the Giants to win the division because of Jason Garrett's offensive acumen and realizing what they couldn't do and going with what they could do. Well, I see that in New York. And I don't see that in Dallas. I see a dysfunctional team. I see a team that doesn't know if they really want to run the football, although they have one of the best backs in the game in Zeke Elliott. So I'm just a little confused right now as to what the plan is in Dallas. And, I don't know. I'd be surprised if McCarthy's fired after 1 year. But, there's grumblings. There are people out there that aren't happy there. And one and done might be possible. We'll see. Philadelphia, the Eagles, they play tonight. And for my money against Seattle, 7-3 Seahawks teams comes into Lincoln Financial. That's a tough game for the Eagles. It's a game I don't expect for them to win. I think Seattle knows that they have to win games. They've got to find a way to stay, up there with the Los Angeles Rams. The Cardinals lost yesterday, surprisingly, in New England. It's surprising because I thought they were going to go up there and win. But with all that said, the Eagles aren't the only team here with incentives. Seattle has big incentives. So right now, if you're a Washington football fan, you're rooting for the Seattle Seahawks. You need them to beat the Philadelphia Eagles to knock, Philadelphia down a peg and keep Washington right there with the Giants. I was looking at the schedules, for these teams coming up. I would probably say, I don't want to say the Giants have the easier tilt out of all of them. I think that's probably going to come down to the Eagles having the easier schedule. But that last game against Washington, Week 17 in Philadelphia, for some reason to me looms large. It has the makings of that Hollywood script that we've seen all year with this team, where they may have to play the Eagles to get in. So interesting stuff, but I want to get your thoughts. Let me know what you think as far as the podcast, as far as the video of this. We're trying to mix it up and do some stuff differently for you. Remember to check out the good work of a lot of great people who are busting their tails to give you some quality work during COVID at sportsjourney.com. And Sports Journey does yes, indeed, have its own social media as well. So you can go to on Facebook and Instagram, Sports Journey Com, just like sportsjourney.com, but just Sports Journey Com. And then on Twitter, it's Sports Journey. So, you can check out all the good stuff that, so many good people are doing with us. And I'm definitely appreciative of that. So we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to have more NFL talk right here. And then we're going to talk about, I told myself that I really want to go there. But yeah, we're going to talk about some stuff that we saw Saturday night. Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, the big fight. And that wasn't the big fight of the night. Speaking of night, we're going to talk about that because somebody went night-night. So we'll talk about that when we come back right here after practice with myself, Lake Lewis. Welcome back, everyone, after practice podcast. And, I thought we were going to break down the schedules, for all four NFC East teams, and I kind of tried to compile the numbers as far as who should have the tougher tilt out of all four teams, and I ranked them. And for me, I think Washington has the toughest schedule, out of all these teams remaining to make the playoffs. I just do. When you look at Washington and look at the teams that they have to play, Sunday against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Steelers still undefeated, 10-0. Will that change, tomorrow against the Baltimore Ravens? We'll find out. But I have a tendency to think, that they're going to be 11-0 facing Washington on a short week, which could favor Washington in that regard. Not favor them as far as be the favorite to win the game, but just give them something positive to look forward to going against, an undefeated football team, the only undefeated football team in the NFL. They travel next week to, where will it be? Will it be Arizona? Because the city of Santa Clara has an ordinance in place where the 49ers can't practice or play there for a couple weeks. So we do know that we will not be traveling out to Santa Clara. We're all waiting to find out where the game will be, and it looks like it's probably going to be in Arizona. So it could be the second trip out to the desert this year, which, in my opinion, gives something positive for Washington to be in a place that's familiar to them as early as this year, early in the year, week 2. We know they lost to the Cardinals. So that's a tough game, though. Make no mistake about it. The 49ers are not, dead and buried. They beat the Rams yesterday. That was a big win for them to bring their record to 5-6. So they still feel like, they have a shot. If the league does adopt a second wild card participant or a fourth wild card, actually, there'll be 8 teams in the playoffs. Maybe they're one of those teams, that's competing. So now, teams have to play. You've got to win. Washington then, from that point, is back home for 2 in a row against the Seattle Seahawks. We just talked about them against the Eagles. Seattle's trying to get to the Super Bowl. They're trying to get, a nice run set up to be able to play at home in Seattle. So, they've got incentive as well. So Washington's going to have, 3 really tough games to play. And then, of course, the Week 16 matchup against the Carolina Panthers. That's not a walk in the park by any means. Carolina is decent. They're playing decent football. They win some, they lose some, but at the end of the day, they're competitive. I think under their first-year coach, they're showing signs that, they're starting to go in the right direction as well. And we already know what that game is about. That's Ron Rivera's old team. That's his old stomping ground. So he's going to be playing against a team that he coached for over a decade. And, it's going to be interesting to see, how that storyline plays out. But make no mistake about it, some of his former players who are endeared to the guy and really love the guy still would want nothing better than to derail his plans in his first year in Washington of making the playoffs. So, that game will have a lot of juice to it as well. And then, of course, the final game at Philadelphia, Week 17. That could be for all the marbles. It more than likely could be. It has a chance to. So Washington has 5 games that are they going to be favored in any of those games? That remains to be seen. But when I say that because they're no cakewalks. they've got a tough, brutal 5-game stretch to make the playoffs, to win the division. And if they get through these 5 games, let's just say they can go 3-2, that'll win it. I think, 7 wins in the NFC East this year, that wins the division. So if they somehow, some way could come out of this tilt 3-2, starting to look to me like, Pittsburgh could be an L. San Fran, that could be an L too. That could be tough. Seattle could be an L. But if you can win your final 2 games, that's 6 wins. Might not get it done for you, so you've got to find a way to steal another one, and it would have to be the San Fran game. So I think most people would say, for right now, Pittsburgh and Seattle, clear 2 losses. I think most people would say that. But San Francisco, Carolina, and Philadelphia are winnable football games, and those might be the games you need to get to 7 to win the division. So Washington's schedule's very tough in that regard. Dallas Cowboys, Baltimore Ravens coming up, that's an L. Cincinnati, at Cincinnati, I don't know. Cincinnati competed last night or yesterday against the Giants, so, probably may lean to Dallas towards that game. But then they have San Francisco in Dallas, Philadelphia in Dallas, and then at New York. They're not winning those games. I just don't see it. So even if they could win 2 out of those games, it's only 5 dubs for them. They're probably done, more than likely. The Eagles. Now, see, this is where it gets interesting. The Eagles, naturally tonight against Seattle, I think that's an L. They travel to Green Bay next week. I think that's an L. They have New Orleans the week after that at home, and Philadelphia at the Link. I think that's an L. They travel to Arizona week 16. I think that's an L. And then they have Washington at home. Final game. It may not matter at that point. If they lose these other games, the game against Washington doesn't matter, at least for the Eagles to do anything but knock Washington out of contention if they were to be in contention. So for me, I said this about 2 weeks ago that I thought the Giants were going to win the NFC East based on schedules and the way teams were performing. I still hold to that, ironically. I know it's a Washington podcast, and I try to be unbiased and fair. I just think that their schedule's set up for them. I think it's a little less tough than Washington, but it's tough, don't get me wrong. But they have that tiebreaker. That tiebreaker is going to be, it's astronomical how big it is as far as what it can do, as far as springboarding them past Washington. So the Giants at Seattle next week, probably an L. If you're a Washington fan, you need that. You need these to be L's. So that could be an L against Seattle. Then they have the Cardinals at home. Tough game, kind of an old school, back in the day, NFC East game. Some of you too young to remember when the Cards were in the NFC East, but those were games that used to be, tough football games. Cardinals need a W. Right now they're struggling. They're 6-5 after losing up in New England yesterday, so they need a W in the worst way. So if you're a Washington football fan, you hope the Giants lose that game. Then they have the Cleveland Browns coming in. Cleveland, they're winning games right now, so and they're trying to position themselves for a nice playoff spot, perhaps a wild card game, because they're not going to catch the Steelers. So if you're Cleveland, you have incentive as well. So, these are playoff caliber football games. Week 16 for the Giants. Come back down this way, but they play at Baltimore. The Ravens need W's in the worst way. And I think after they get one hung on them tonight, they'll be 6-5. If you're Baltimore, you're not making the playoffs if the playoff starts right now. And if you lose tonight, it's doubly worse. If there's such a word, it's even harder. So you've got to find a way to get a W over the Giants. And if you're a Washington football fan, you absolutely are going to be rooting for Lamar Jackson and Harbaugh and these guys to get a W against the Giants. And then finally, the Giants close the season out against the Cowboys. That's a win, big time. It's in Dallas. I'm sorry, it's in New York, because remember, Dak Prescott got hurt against the Giants in Dallas. So it's in New York. Can Dallas play the role of spoiler? I mean, they may be playing for jobs at that point if you're a Cowboys fan. Your coach may be playing for a job, your coordinator, your defensive coordinator, players on the field. They may be playing for jobs, for security for next year. So maybe they still have incentive to play the Giants and not lay down and start their fishing trip early. We'll see how that plays out. But definitely wanted to touch on that, the NFC race, playoff race. It's just good that we have football in December that's meaningful. For me, this is all you can ask for as a journalist. You want to cover a team that has a chance to win, has a chance to compete for something. I hated the fact that, for several years, of my 8 years covering this team, it's been tough. Maybe 2 of those years they had meaningful games in December, and they found ways to lose those games. And then naturally they did win the division, 2015. 2012 they won it, and we know about Robert Griffin and that whole thing. And in 2015, 3 years later, they win it. Ironically, they had to beat the Eagles to get in. And that could be the storyline here. It could be deja vu all over again. I think most Washington football fans would sign up for that in a heartbeat if that could happen. So we'll see how that plays out. What else did you do this weekend? Did you spend time with your family, with some friends? Hopefully you were safe and you weren't out and about with no mask. A lot of people are doing that now, and I try not to be political on this show, but folks, we got to be responsible so that you and I can see each other again at the games and interact like how we always used to do, But if people are being irresponsible, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that. But with that said, how was your weekend? Did you get a chance to get out, do the yard, cook some more, eat some more, sleep some more after you ate? I know a lot of us did. Or did you get a chance to watch the fight? Did you get a chance to watch the stuff that came on Saturday night, Mike Tyson, Roy Jones? And listen, for all the negative comments about them looking old, they are old. I mean, what do you expect? They're both 50 plus. Mike Tyson's 54, and I don't know too many 54-year-olds looking like that. Mike looked in shape. And Mike, I know there were 2-minute rounds, 8 2-minute rounds, but Mike didn't look gassed. Maybe I saw something different. I didn't see a whole lot of huffing and puffing. I saw guys that it seemed like as the fight kept going, they started throwing more punches, ironically. Roy Jones early looked like, my gosh, he looked like he needed an oxygen mask in the second round, third round. He was going back to his corner, and I'm like, is this guy going to get up off his stool? I mean, he looked that gassed, that tired. But as the fight went on, they really started throwing punches. So I guess maybe, guys that did it at the highest of levels, maybe that muscle memory kicked in and they just went back and reverted to what they naturally know how to do, and that's box. Well, one of the preliminary fights was, it's hard not to make light of it, but, I respect all professionals because they do something that I like to think I'm a professional at what I do, and I would hate for somebody to feel like they can just sit in my chair and do what I do and with no effort involved. So I don't do that to professional athletes. I know how much they put into their craft. But I will say this, Nate Robinson, former NBA player, little guy that used to be able to dunk on everybody, had game. I was a big fan of his when he played in the league. I like the fact that he was an underdog and he went at it. He's trying his hand at boxing now. He's 36 years old, so this isn't a young guy starting something. This is an older guy, and he's doing what he wants to do. I don't knock anyone for doing that. If that's what you want to do, if that's what gives you joy, do what you want to do. But he got into the ring to box, and he fought this kid Paul and got put to sleep. I mean, literally got put to sleep. Look at this.
He's singing the hymns. He's trying to get spiritual. That's it! Mamma mia, the problem child proving to be a big problem for Nate Robinson.
My goodness.
And of course...
Now, the funny part about all of this is listen to Snoop during this right now. Listen to him humming and hemming and just... I'm going to say this. Snoop Dogg, to me, Saturday night, put his name out there that he could do some commentary. And I'm not expecting people to say, "Oh, what are you talking about?" He wasn't doing X's and O's, none of that. But his color commentary was exactly what it is. It was colorful. It was funny. It was needed. It was entertaining. It was unscripted. Hell, he was even cursing. That kind of surprised me a little bit. The concert and all that stuff that he did, French Montana, some of the other guys. I was surprised it wasn't edited. But you know what? I don't listen to the stuff edited in my car, so whatever. I'm okay with it. But at the end of the day, Snoop gave fans entertainment, and that's what it's supposed to be. And a lot of people, not just myself, a lot of people were like, "Man, this guy was pretty good at this. It was funny. It was something different from hearing former boxers. It just gave a different perspective, more of a fan's perspective. But when he's hemming and humming and all that stuff, when Nate Robinson got put to sleep, that was incredible. That was funny. It was epic to me. But if you're Nate Robinson, he's going to continue fighting because he's a competitor and he's not going to go out like that. But just to see the backlash that he's getting, to see all the comments and people are like, "Man, give it up. You got knocked out, you got put to sleep," all the memes, everything, gifs that I saw on social media. You got to have some super thick skin because people will never relive that. That was one of the more brutal knockouts I've ever seen. And I just couldn't understand why he was charging the whole fight, like head down. Even Snoop said, this isn't like in the alley, man. This isn't the streets. It's not hood fight. This is boxing. And he looked like he was just trying to get in there and scrap. No, there's an art to this, and if he really wants to do this and be any good at it, he's gonna have to going back to the drawing board and work on his craft because that was pretty bad. It was bad. Just for one time, old time's sakes, let's just look at this one more time. I mean, just right here, he's charging. And the way he goes down, I mean, I've seen Pacquiao get put to sleep. Just recently, who was it? Just recently was a fight that we saw, and the guy got put to sleep literally same way. Devontae Davis fight. He knocked out his opponent and put him to sleep. And you're thinking to yourself when you see this, it's funny for a second, but then you realize these guys are hurt. Like, these guys are out cold, and you want to make sure you see some breathing and some movement because, those punches look like guys were dying in the ring. That's how vicious those punches were. When Nate Robinson was one of the more vicious ones, and, I got a lot of laughs out of it. I did. I'm glad to see he's okay, taking it, like a sport, true pro. But, did you see it? How many of you saw that? Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of this podcast. You can, again, text me, you can DM me, you can pop up on social media, let me know what you think. It's just something different. Obviously you get the main chunk of this in audio. Like I said, you can subscribe to all the major podcast carriers and pick it up in audio, but just wanted to do something different. It's COVID, we're home, we're in studio, I have a studio here, so you just you want to do those things, mix it up. So as always, folks, we'll be back on, and I'm trying to do this for you every day. It's tough, mixing in the schedule. Practice this week will be different. The NFL, sent us out, all of us, the team media that covers the team, that it's going to be more limited again, much more limited than it's ever been in the history of covering this team, where you're only going to have, a couple of reporters per day, not 10 or 15. Not 7. It's going to be just very few. And, so a lot of us may not be out there as frequent as possible. So just remember to follow, check us out when we rotate or whatever to see who'll be out there for those practices. I do expect to be out there for some, but not a whole lot. And that's just because of COVID. So, again, it's not anything to do with the team or anything like that. They're doing the best they can. And, we all have to follow suit and do our part as well. So remember, wear a mask. It's not hard. I know a lot of you are looking at it in political terms. Look at it in humanitarian terms. Look at it as if you're in great shape. I'm in good health, thank God. but, you know, some people around me may not be. Well, I've got to do my part to ensure that they are. So just be smart, be responsible, folks. As always, appreciate you checking me out. Check me out tomorrow. Also, tomorrow evening, myself and Josina Anderson, you know her, she needs no introduction, will be, you know, on her outlet and, you know, breaking down more stuff, having some great guests come on as well. So remember to check us out tomorrow. I think we'll be live on social media, Twitch, YouTube, Twitter at 7 o'clock. So it should be from like 7 to 7:30. I'll tweet it out during the day and you'll know her format, her forum as well. So appreciate all the support from everybody out there. Have a good one. Take care.